Hey everyone, I'm Thaddeus. Welcome to our farm. We're standing down by Cache Creek. It's the end of June, just starting tomato season here. And we're in our heirloom tomato field. I have a box of tomatoes here that are dead ripe. These are perfectly ready to eat. But the elusive heirloom tomato is not always like this. In fact, it starts totally green. Let's watch the process. This is a vintage wine variety. Got little babies. And if you look further up the plant, you can see flowers. And these flowers are going to turn into the next set of heirloom tomatoes. So what happens with this crop is plants start on the ground obviously and grow up. We tie them with string as they go up. And the plants set flowers as they grow. So we harvest from the bottom first. And then once this fruit harvests, we come up and harvest the next fruit. By the time this fruit harvests, we will have harvested the top fruit. Let's talk about what it means to be a vine-ripe tomato. In normal industry, people will pick tomatoes grass green, we call it. Grass green as hard as a rock, even greener than this. And what they'll do is they pick them grass green, they cool them in water, and then they put them into a refrigerator and keep them at 32 degrees. And the fruit's actually no longer ripening. It never even started to ripen on the vine. When it becomes time, when they want to sell this tomato's been robbed of its natural maturity process in the normal tomato world. So they'll pull this tomato out of the cooler and they'll put it in a gas chamber where they'll gas it and they'll trick the tomato into ripening. And what happens is the gases fool the tomato into ripening, so the tomato will end up looking ripe. It'll turn into a deep red, perfectly uniform. You'll buy that tomato thinking, wow, I have a beautiful red, juicy tomato. And when you go to cut it open and eat it, it tastes like cardboard. The reason for that is it wasn't able to start the ripening process on the vine. There's a really fine line where the ripening process has started on the vine and it hasn't. And basically, if a tomato starts to turn color on the vine, it's begun the natural ripening process. And as you pluck it off of the vine and you keep it above 50 degrees, the tomato never stops the natural ripening process. We just are able to slow it down so that we can get it to you sooner. So let's take a look at some examples. Okay, so Farm Fresh to you customers, when you open your box and we're delivering you tomatoes, you're gonna have to look at the condition of the tomatoes to decide the best way to use them or store them. Generally, you're gonna get tomatoes, you should never get tomatoes that are this green. Sometimes you will, apologize that for now. You should get them in these two color stages, where they're still really firm and kind of green and not full color, or you're gonna get them, they're totally full color and they may be soft. Rule number one, never, ever, ever put a tomato in the refrigerator. If you put them in a refrigerator, these tomatoes don't like it colder than 50 degrees. If you put them in the refrigerator and then you take them out, they're going to lose all of their tomato flavor and they're going to be mushy. And you're going to really wonder why we're sending you terrible fruit. And the reality is that it's not terrible, but if you cool it down below 50 degrees, and most refrigerators are in the low 30s, it really ruins the structure and taste of a tomato. So don't ever put tomatoes in the refrigerator. The right place to store them is on the counter. If you receive a tomato and it's firm and it still has some of the green color left in it, you'll probably be able to leave that on your counter for close to a week, and it'll slowly make the transition into this full ripe color. If you get them when they're at the full ripe color, really the time's ticking and you need to eat them as soon as possible. Now, what if you don't want to eat them as soon as possible? How can you preserve them and store them for longer periods of time? The best thing would be to do, cut the stem out, dice them into chunks, put them in a stove pot, boil them until they reduce down to about 75% of the original volume, and then you can freeze that and use that over the winter. Throwing a whole tomato in the freezer will not work. You have to actually process it before you can freeze it. So, recap, you'll get the tomatoes, don't ever put them in the refrigerator. If they're full color and ripe, you need to eat them right away. If you don't want to eat them fresh and you want to figure out how to preserve them, cook them down and then freeze them. If you get them and they're not quite as ripe as you want them to be, leave them on your counter and they'll make the transition naturally into full ripeness within a matter of days. Enjoy our tomatoes. Thanks.